There is something I have never said out loud to my children because I know how it would sound if I said it wrong. I was more afraid of becoming dependent on them than I was of moving halfway around the world alone at 70. Picture this. It is 6 in the morning in Tagaytay. The air is cool enough that I'm holding a mug of coffee with both hands, not because I need to, but because I like the warmth. There is a rooster somewhere down the road that has apparently decided sunrise is a personal emergency. A tricycle coughs to life near the corner. Across from me, beyond the railing, everything is damp and green from rain the night before. My phone is on the little plastic table beside me. 3 unread messages from my daughter, 2 from my son. They are not angry messages. That would almost be easier. They are worried messages. Dad, are you sure this is what you want? Dad, you know there's still time to come back. Dad, we could make room. And I remember looking out over that wet green hillside and thinking, I know you could make room. That is exactly what scares me. 6 months earlier, I was living in Ohio in a 2-bedroom condo that cost me $1,742 a month. Once I counted the mortgage, association fee, property tax, insurance, utilities, and all the little things nobody includes when they tell you what their housing costs. $1,742 every month. Now I pay 32,000 pesos for a furnished 1-bedroom place in Tagaytay. At the exchange rate when I signed the lease, that was a little under $560 a month. I have a small balcony, decent internet, a washing machine that sounds like it is trying to escape during the spin cycle, and a view that still makes me stop sometimes when I walk past the window. I am not telling you that because I think cheap rent is the meaning of freedom. It is not. I am telling you because numbers have a way of revealing what feelings try to hide. My name is Robert Hale. I am 70 years old. I grew up outside Toledo, Ohio, worked 38 years in industrial equipment sales, and retired at 68 after convincing myself for at least 5 years that I would retire the following year. I was married to my wife Susan for 41 years. She died 4 years ago after a fast, ugly fight with pancreatic cancer. 11 months from diagnosis to funeral. That was the dividing line in my life. Before Susan died, I thought retirement was going to be something we did together. We had a yellow legal pad in the kitchen drawer with places written on it: Charleston, Santa Fe, Vancouver, maybe Ireland if we could get Susan over her fear of long flights. She had circled Charleston twice and written October, not July, underneath it because she hated humidity. After she died, the list stayed in the drawer. For almost a year, so did I. I do not mean literally. I went to the grocery store. I went to church sometimes. I had coffee with an old coworker named Dennis on Wednesdays. I saw my kids, but I stopped having any real sense that I was moving toward something. My daughter, Melissa, lives near Raleigh with her husband and 2 teenagers. My son, Daniel, lives outside Columbus. They are good kids. I want to be clear about that because stories like this can get twisted into heroes and villains. And that is not what happened. They love me. That was part of the problem. After Susan died, every conversation slowly became about where I should live. Melissa wanted me in North Carolina. She sent me listings for active adult communities within 20 minutes of her house. Daniel wanted me closer to Columbus. He said I could sell the condo, rent something near him, and we could have dinner every Sunday. At first I was touched. Then I started noticing the language changing. It went from, would you ever consider moving closer to, you really should be closer. Then it became where we need to make a plan before something happens. Before something happens. If you are over 65, you know that phrase. People say it with concern, but it can make your entire future sound like a medical incident waiting to occur. I know, they were being practical. I had a cardiac scare the year after Susan died. It turned out to be an arrhythmia that my doctor said was manageable, but it rattled everyone. My daughter flew in for 2 days. Daniel started asking whether I was still driving at night. Melissa wanted access to my medical portal. Suddenly, everybody was paying attention to whether there were grab bars in my shower. I understood why. I also hated who I was becoming in their eyes. Not Dad. A risk category. A logistics problem. A man who needed to be positioned correctly before he became inconvenient. They never said that. I'm not claiming they did. That was how it felt to me, and feelings can be unfair while still being real. So I tried the sensible options. I spent 3 weeks in North Carolina near Melissa. I rented a furnished apartment 10 minutes away and treated it like a test run. I went to my grandson's soccer game. I picked my granddaughter up from school once. Melissa and I had coffee on her back patio. It was nice. It was also her life, her calendar, her neighborhood, her routines, her friends, her children's schedules. I could fit into it, but I could feel myself becoming an accessory to a life that was already full. Then I tried Columbus. I stayed near Daniel for 12 days. He meant every word about Sunday dinner, but he works long hours. His wife works in healthcare. And by Wednesday of the second week, I realized I'd spent most of my time sitting in a rental apartment, watching television and waiting for someone else's schedule to open. Nobody did anything wrong. That is what made the decision harder. If they had treated me badly, I could have left angry. Instead, I had to leave loved. That is a much heavier suitcase. The Philippines entered my life because of a man named Dennis and a terrible cup of diner coffee. We were sitting in our usual booth one Wednesday morning when he mentioned a former supervisor from our company who had retired to Iloilo. I laughed. I thought he was joking. I said, "At our age?" Dennis looked at me and said, "Bob, what age are you waiting to become?" That line bothered me for 3 days. Then I made the mistake, or maybe the best mistake, of opening YouTube late one night. I watched one video about retiring in the Philippines, then another, then an hour disappeared, then two. I saw men my age walking through public markets talking about rent, healthcare, visas, humidity, loneliness, relationships, traffic, power outages, and all the things that go wrong after the honeymoon period ends. That last part mattered to me. I did not trust the videos that made everything look perfect. I trusted the ones where a guy would say, "Here is what I love, and here is what drives me absolutely crazy." So I started researching like I used to research a new sales territory, spreadsheets, notes, questions. I joined expat Facebook groups and mostly kept quiet. I read arguments about cities I had never heard of. I learned that some people loved Dumaguete and some people thought it was overrated. I learned that Manila could be exciting and exhausting in the same afternoon. I learned that Cebu had everything but came with big city trade-offs. I kept seeing Tagaytay mentioned by people who liked cooler weather and wanted to be close enough to Manila without living in it. I started looking at actual rental listings. That was when the idea stopped feeling like fantasy. These were not millionaires. They were retired teachers, electricians, military guys, warehouse managers, widowers, divorced men, couples living on pensions, regular people. Some were doing well. Some had made foolish decisions and were warning everybody else not to copy them. I spent 4 months trying to talk myself out of going. I called my cardiologist and asked what I would need to think about if I spent extended time abroad. I reviewed my medications. I checked travel insurance and private health coverage options. I looked at hospitals. I calculated what it would cost to come back to the United States twice a year if I wanted to. I made copies of documents. I researched visas until the words extension and ACR card started showing up in my dreams. I even made a list called Reasons This Is Stupid. It had 23 items: heat, distance from family, healthcare uncertainty, language and cultural mistakes, typhoons, being the old foreigner who thinks he understands a country after watching videos about it. That one was underlined, but there was another list, reasons I might regret not going. That list only had one item, because I still can. When I finally told Melissa and Daniel, the conversation went worse than I had hoped and better than I had feared. Melissa cried. Daniel got quiet, which is what he does when he is angry. Melissa asked whether this was about them. I said no. She asked why I would choose to live 12 time zones away when I had family who wanted me close. I remember looking at the floor because I knew the answer would hurt her. I said, because I don't want the last healthy years of my life to be organized around being near help I don't need yet. She said, what if you do need it? I said, then we deal with that when it is true. Daniel said I was being reckless. Maybe I was. But there is a strange thing that happens when you get older. Everyone tells you to enjoy retirement, travel, live your life. Then the moment you make a decision that contains actual risk, they want you to choose the safest available version of living. I did not want danger. I wanted ownership. There is a difference. I sold the condo. I put family photographs, Susan's recipe box, and a few things I could not bear to part with into a small climate-controlled storage unit near Daniel. I gave away more than I expected. 41 years of marriage creates a shocking amount of stuff. The hardest thing to give away was not furniture. It was our dining table. Susan and I bought it in 1989. Both kids did homework there. We opened college acceptance letters there. We argued there. We ate Thanksgiving dinner there. After she died, I sat at one end by myself and kept setting my plate in the same place. A young couple bought it for $140. When they carried it out, I stood in the empty room and cried harder than I had at any point during the move. That night I almost canceled my ticket. I thought, what are you doing, Bob? You're 70 years old. Your wife is gone. Your kids want you. You have a perfectly good life here if you would just stop expecting it to feel like the old one. But that was exactly it. I was not trying to rebuild the old life. I needed permission to have a different one. My flight landed in Manila on a humid afternoon that felt like someone had wrapped a warm towel around my entire body. Within 20 minutes, I was sweating through the back of my shirt. My suitcase wheel jammed. I could not understand half of what the driver was saying over the traffic. I saw motorcycles moving through gaps I would not have attempted on a bicycle. For the first hour, I thought Daniel might have been right. Then we climbed toward Tagaytay. The air changed. The temperature dropped. Roadside stands appeared with fruit, plants, coffee, little places selling food. I saw signs for Bulalo everywhere and had no idea what it was. My driver told me I had to try it. My first rental was not the place I live in now. It was a short-term condo for 30 days while I looked around. The photos online had been generous. The mountain view required leaning over the balcony and looking hard to the left. The hot water worked when it felt like it. At 2 in the morning on my second night, a dog barked for what I am convinced was 45 consecutive minutes. And I was happy, not movie happy, not dancing around the room happy. I was alert, interested. My brain was working again. Every ordinary task required me to pay attention. Buying groceries, figuring out transportation, learning which bills could be paid where, understanding that later does not always mean what an American thinks later means, remembering to be patient when something took longer than expected. I made mistakes. I overpaid for a ride my first week because I was embarrassed to ask the price again. I bought a bag of what I thought were sweet pastries and discovered they were not remotely what I expected. I wore jeans on a day that became much warmer than the forecast suggested and regretted every decision that led me to that moment. Little things, but little things make a day feel full. By the second month, I had rented the one-bedroom place I mentioned earlier for 32,000 pesos. It came furnished with a gray sofa, a table with one leg slightly shorter than the others, and curtains that I would never have chosen, but now cannot imagine replacing. My monthly life became simpler. Rent, utilities, groceries, transportation, health coverage, phone, internet, eating out, and a little money set aside for trips. I was spending less, yes, but more important, I no longer felt like most of my retirement income was being swallowed by a home I was maintaining for memories. I found a coffee shop where the woman behind the counter started remembering my order after about 3 weeks. I met a retired Australian named Peter who talks too much but knows every practical thing a newcomer needs to know. I started walking in the mornings when the weather cooperated. I learned to like calamansi in more things than I expected, and I learned that freedom can be lonely. Nobody tells that part loudly enough. There were evenings when I would see a photograph Melissa posted of the family eating together and feel physically sick with homesickness. There were Sundays when Daniel would call and I could hear plates and voices behind him, and after we hung up, my apartment felt too quiet. Freedom does not erase love. It charges you for distance. That is the price. I have gone back to the United States twice since moving. The first trip was for Christmas. Melissa hugged me at the airport so hard I thought she might crack a rib. Daniel asked 100 questions about my health without admitting that is what he was doing. The strangest thing was that our relationship felt better. When I was living in Ohio, I think we were all unconsciously preparing for my decline. Every visit had a shadow over it. Should Dad sell the condo? Should Dad stop driving so much? Should Dad be closer? What happens later? Now we talk about what is happening. Melissa asks what I ate. My granddaughter wants pictures of strange snacks from the grocery store. Daniel asks what things cost. I ask about their lives because I am no longer silently measuring whether there is room for me inside them. I am their father again, not their future responsibility, at least not yet. I am not naive. I will not be 70 forever. There may come a day when my health changes and this stops making sense. There may come a day when I need to be closer to my children or when I want to be. If that day comes, I hope I am wise enough to recognize it instead of turning freedom into stubbornness. But I refuse to live that future early. That is the part I wish more people understood. Preparing for old age is responsible. Pretending you are already helpless is not. You can be grateful that your children want you close and still choose something else. You can love your grandchildren and still decide not to build your entire retirement around being available for Tuesday afternoon pickups. You can miss your family and still be exactly where you want to be. Two truths can sit at the same table. I am 70. I do not know how many healthy years I have left, maybe 15, maybe 5. Maybe something happens next month. That uncertainty used to make me want to shrink my life so nothing could go wrong. Now it does the opposite. This morning, before I started talking about all this, I was sitting on my balcony with that same mug of coffee. The road was still wet. Somebody nearby was sweeping water and leaves away from the front of a shop. The rooster was still furious at the morning. My phone buzzed. It was Melissa. She sent me a photograph of my grandson holding up his driver's permit. Under it, she wrote, "Call when you're awake. He wants to tell you himself." I smiled because she still forgets I am already halfway through my morning when they are getting ready for bed. Then I looked out at the hillside again. For years, I thought being a good father meant being close enough to answer every call in person. Now I think it means something different. I think my children need to see that getting older does not automatically mean surrendering your choices. Maybe one day they will be 70. Maybe their own children will be looking at them with that same mixture of love and fear. I hope they remember me then, not as the father who moved away from them, as the father who still had somewhere he wanted to go. My children wanted me closer. I understood why. I love them for asking, and I chose freedom anyway.